This episode discusses themes of childhood abuse, addiction, trauma, and the emotional challenges of parenting while healing. These topics may be distressing or triggering for some listeners. Please take care while listening and prioritize your mental and emotional well-being.
For the haters, come on, do it now or later. Yeah. It don't matter what your name is, share your story, we'll be waiting. For the haters, whoa.
Welcome back to For the Haters. Today's conversation is about resilience, breaking generational cycles, and finding purpose in both motherhood and advocacy. Our guest, Jessica, grew up in a home marked by addiction, abuse, and trauma, but she refused to let that define her future. Today, she's a mother of two, a son and a beautiful autistic daughter, an educator and an advocate who has dedicated her life to helping children who feel unseen and unheard. This is a powerful reminder that we can choose to break the cycles that we come from and build something better for the next generation. Let's get into it. Jessica, welcome to For the Haters. Thank you so much for being here. Can you just start out by sharing a little bit about yourself, your upbringing, and what those early years looked like for you?
Thank you for having me. My early years, I guess they were shaped by experiences that a lot of children really shouldn't have to go through. I grew up in a home where my father struggled with alcohol abuse, drug addiction, and with that came a lot of verbal and physical abuse, and emotional abuse, both towards myself, my younger brother, my mother. There was a lot of unpredictability in my household. One moment, like things were fine, and then the next, it was just walking on eggshells, and everything very quickly went to chaos. When my father would drink, he would often call myself, my mother, names, and a lot of that really affected the way I think that I viewed myself. My own being did not feel safe because it was constantly under attack. It was pretty brutal. I mean, he would call us names. He'd pretty much make us feel worthless. And a lot of the times his anger would also turn physical. There's many nights that I can recall spending sleeping in my mom's car. We would just leave to avoid what was happening, or she would make sure that we left so that we wouldn't have to see those things or go through it. Looking back, I think the most painful part of the abuse was that it forced me to grow up really, really soon. We were dealing with this since I was probably younger than 5. I want to say, yeah, definitely by the age of 5. And I was kind of playing the role of an adult. My mom would lean on me, cry to me about things going on, and she was dealing with her own trauma and trying to rewrite that story for herself, and it was really hard because she was stuck in that cycle, and I wanted to take that pain away and to fix that for her, but I couldn't because I was a kid. So I think growing up, having to absorb a lot of those adult fears, that really, it just made the world feel very unsafe to me. Yeah.
And that's all of that's hard for anyone to go through, let alone a child.
I had a younger brother that, he was not born until I was 8. So he was a lot younger than I was. So when he was born, things got a lot more complicated.
Yeah. And what does that relationship look like with you and your mom now, or even with you and your dad?
Well, my mom, me and my mom, she's my best friend. I just recently moved to another state just to be close with her again. She eventually divorced my father when I was in my 20s and began her life from there. And I think it was hard at first for me in my younger 20s. I was dealing with, I think, a lot of the healing of that. And I did blame her for some of it until I did the work myself through therapy. And started to realize the cycle that she was also trapped in. she was afraid that
Yeah.
she wouldn't be able to leave. But now our relationship is stronger than ever. She has a great relationship with my children. I
Mhm.
see her every day, and I'm very, very thankful for her.
You speak with a lot of empathy, and just like how you were speaking before, you speak with a lot of empathy towards, what she did while you were a child. And so there was just something that triggered in my mind, like, oh, there must be some healing that happened
Yeah.
that made you recognize what she was going through, and in that moment, right? And giving her a little bit of grace.
Yeah. And it wasn't an easy process and it's funny because just recently, in thinking about this whole thing and just kind of trying to get my thoughts together around it, I had a conversation with her about that.
Hmm.
And, there are things that I don't think she even likes to talk about now, because I think she's not proud of some moments too. She was stressed and in the middle of a domestic violence relationship, and she was trying her hardest. So being able to talk to her recently about those things has also helped, even years later,
Hmm.
to actually have a conversation about that. But it wasn't the easiest road. My early 20s were harder to heal from. I did hold a lot of resentment, and I felt like she could have gotten us away, and it was tough.
Yeah. And at what point did you realize the impact that the trauma was having on your life?
I would say I would say it was an ongoing. It's still today. I'm seeing
Hmm.
different things in my life that I think that I've moved past something, and then something new happens. But really, the turning point, I think, for me was when my daughter was born.
Do you have a relationship with your father now?
I do, but there is a lot of boundaries there.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, recently, just around the holidays, he had come to a rehab facility, and I thought, this is great. I've been through this before with him, though, so I'm very cautious
Hmm.
because there was multiple rehab facilities in the past. But this time, he seemed very committed, and so I ended up picking him up from there, and we spent a great week together of him sober. He told me a lot of things that I did not know, and it was great. He lives in New York. I live in Florida, so he had to go back home. And things were good for a couple weeks, but now I've not heard from him for a month. And usually that's the sign. I hope that it's not, but usually that is.
Yeah.
Um, that has been a very hard process, though, because of the abuse that is the backing of that.
Like there takes a lot of like forgiveness to even put
Yeah,
yourself in that situation. When we talked, you mentioned about carrying this trauma for a long time, and I'm just curious, when did that healing process start for you? When did you start recognizing that it was something you needed to actively work on to heal?
I would say definitely when my daughter was born.
Hmm.
I think I realized at that time that I just wanted to show up for her in ways that I wasn't shown up for.
Hmm.
Um, I wanted to make sure that I was emotionally present with her and create a home that she was safe in and that she felt supported. And in doing that, I had to break out of those patterns that were so deeply ingrained in me. Um, and that was probably the turning point for me. Like, I remember the day my daughter was born, just telling her as a baby in my arms so that she could understand me, but promising her that I would tell her how beautiful she was every day and how much I loved her,
Hmm.
because I never wanted her to doubt that or feel the weight that I carried. Um, yeah,
Do, do you feel that your willingness to forgive and to heal inside those relationships with both of your parents has to do also with your daughter, like you knowing that you needed to heal those parts of you to be a better version for her?
absolutely. It was affecting me in ways that I didn't even realize, in terms of like anxiety and panic attacks, and with situations with her where it would just bring me back to a moment. If I would suddenly get frustrated and yell for a second,
Hmm.
it would bring me back to those moments. And I knew early on when she was very little that I needed to start talking about this and seeing someone and really diving into what it was that causes me to react or do, or even approach situations in ways that I do. And that took a lot of work. And it's still taking work. I recently got married last year, and I've seen different things come up in that process, that I never saw a healthy marriage. So I'm trying to learn that as I go and not repeat those patterns. And that's really, really hard because just trying to show up for my partner while also showing up for myself and being graceful, because there's patterns that I've seen and I have a really hard time trying to figure out, well, what's right and what's not.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of time trauma leads to a need for higher amounts of communication, and often we don't know how to communicate as humans, which is a real just big disservice to the ability that we do have. Finding yourself in a relationship, it's not only your communication that matters, it's someone else's communication and their willingness to also take on some of that, right? Like,
Yeah.
when you choose to spend your life with someone, you're also choosing to help heal them in ways that they couldn't themselves. So it has to be hard. There's kind of really no way around that in a healthy way to do.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely takes, I think, daily work.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that it's always easy for him as well. I think that he has hard moments too, where it's like, he questions like, why are you reacting this way? Or, or maybe he doesn't even understand the intensity of where it comes from. So it's very, very hard. Because too, I've noticed that as I've gotten older, I've lived in chaos for so long. I lived in a state of panic, survival mode, since I was 4 or 5 years old, that I almost create that sometimes, when things are too stagnant or normal. It feels like when is the other shoe going to drop?
Yeah, I've spoken about that multiple times, that, healthy feels boring for people that are used to chaos and people that are used to trauma. So
Yeah.
the moment things feel healthy, right? It ends up being like an insight to it being boring for
Yeah.
those that are just used to their life just being kind of flipped upside down.
Yeah. Boring or even suspicious almost. Sometimes it's like, what's about to happen next? And it
Yeah.
causes a very real panic,
Mm-hmm.
that, just something is always wrong and
Yeah.
it just can't be.
Like, this
So
feels too good to be true. Like, what?
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
there has to be something wrong, when in reality there doesn't have to be something
Right.
wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
And does that healing all start from like therapy? Is that what the route that you took to,
Mhm.
to get to where you are now?
Yeah. I think that and a combination of therapy and I think what I ended up ultimately going into for my career really helps me internally.
Mm-hmm.
It is a form of therapy in my life. It can be, it can be work sometimes and it can be stressful and it can be hard, but I think that it also helps me to
Yeah.
kind of heal that inner child that I needed, that adult that I needed when I was growing up.
Mm-hmm. And then, speaking about that, getting there, you became a mother at 21, and you've kind of spoken through this a little bit, but that just really changed the perspective of your life. And, can you just speak through that a little bit more of how it changed this life that you wanted to create now that you had a daughter?
She definitely, when she was born, it changed everything, I think, for me. Like I said, it forced me to take a really good look at the life I wanted and the life I had, and how I was going to change those things in order to achieve that and to show up for her in ways that I wasn't showing up for.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, it was just my chance to rewrite the story. I feel like it was a moment for me where I realized that like my life, my childhood, it didn't need to define hers, and I could be better for her. Yeah, I feel like while I raised her, I also raised myself.
Yeah.
Um,
Like, it was like you were the mother you needed in that
yeah,
moment.
yeah. It's been a healing experience being a mother. I guess that would have been an answer, honestly, to the question you just said. That was part of my healing journey, was becoming a mother.
And, if you can speak a little bit more about breaking those patterns looked like, showing up differently for your daughter.
I think when one was that promise that I made to her. When I was growing up, my mother had her own cycles that she needed to break, and she didn't break them until my children were born. But one of them was a lack of affection for her children. Her mother didn't show her affection, and therefore she didn't. It was foreign to her. I can only remember probably a handful of times that my mom would say that she loved me. And in the midst of all that chaos going on in that world, I needed that. I would hear my friends' mothers say it to them, or parents say it to them, and I would see the affection, the hugs. And I remembered that as I got older, just feeling very unloved in that way, and wanting that. And so when she was born, that was the number one thing that I promised her, was she would never doubt or never, mistake that I didn't love her. And that is probably the number one cycle that I broke. I am extremely affectionate with my daughter. Like, till this day, she's 14 years old, and she knows she can still come cuddle up with me on the couch, and, I'll brush her hair or whatever it is that she needs in that moment. And it's not something that's weird or something that's not, normal to us, because every day I tell her I love her, and every day. And that in itself has been one of the biggest cycles that I have broken. And in return, my mom is extremely affectionate with my kids, which is very healing in a weird way for me, because I didn't get that side of her. But to see it now with them brings me like immense joy.
Yeah, I'm just sitting here. I feel like, I know that we just met, but I feel really proud of you for that being the number one thing that you've broken, the number one pattern that you've broken, because I know how uncomfortable it can be to break that cycle. It's not, it's not just stepping away from abuse, stepping away from, addiction. It is like like changing everything about what you know. And that's really uncomfortable, right? Like, it's really uncomfortable to show affection when you aren't used to it. And so, I feel really proud of you for being able to do that, because I mean, what a difference in life that's going to make for your children, and even for you, right? Being able to feel love and show love, you deserve that. So it's you did break it for your child, but you like you said, you were healing,
Myself.
little Jessica as well. So
Yeah.
and
Thank
even
you.
like, you should be proud of yourself for not resenting your mom. And I'm sure there's moments that you feel you wish that you had that, but that now that your daughter gets that, it's, better than the opposite of kind of what you had to go through.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. I think 100% for me, the resentment now is gone. And I think the reason why is because it essentially has healed me, the love that I have with my children, and seeing her do that now. Yeah,
I understand.
I have my tissues because it does. It helped to show me that she was capable of that it wasn't me. And I know it wasn't now, but it felt like it was.
Your mom, she also deserves that, though, right?
Absolutely.
She never deserved what she was put through, and she never deserved the lack of love that she was given. So
yeah, it's definitely healed me in that sense.
so with everything, your daughter coming and, making this huge difference for you, there was another kind of hurdle that was thrown in your way that you took with ease, which I'm sure that your past history of life of just kind of getting through difficult situations gave a little bit of leeway for you. But how old was your daughter when she was diagnosed? How has that shaped your parenting journey, or how did it, at least in the beginning?
So my daughter was diagnosed at 13 months old, so a little over a year, with at the time it was called pervasive developmental disorder. It
Mhm.
was when she didn't check every box off of autism. It was part of one of the diagnoses under the umbrella back then. She was diagnosed with autism, I want to say less than 6 months later, but it started out as PDD, NOS is what they call it. I don't believe it's a thing anymore. It definitely flipped my life upside down, I think, at first, because I did have suspicions of it ahead of time, and I had already worked in the field of autism, so there were things that I was noticing. But I think it's one of those things that even though you see it, you're kind of like, no, I don't think so,
Mhm.
as a parent, because you don't want to start to think about a life where your child might struggle. And it started to become really apparent to me when she started losing her speech. She had a couple words and then it was gone. I guess that is when I realized the strength that I had on me, because I found this out, and it was just full drive at that point. It was, where do I go? Where do I get the services? I'm going to fight for however many hours she needs. And honestly, at that time in my life, I wasn't very educated on it. So I just made a random call of, I'm going to get as much as I can. Looking back now, I know that that's what changed the course of her life. I think that is where my strength appeared as a mom. And I realized that I loved this little girl so much, and I was going to do anything and everything I could. And I had therapists in my house around the clock, 7 days a week. It was not fun, but I would do it all over again, because when my daughter was 4, she started talking finally.
Mhm.
And finally at 5, she was potty trained. And like, it became this really heavy journey that led to, she still struggles today, but if anybody has a conversation with her today, they would never know that she was nonverbal until she was almost 5, because she's a social butterfly now.
Yeah.
Socially awkward, but she's a social butterfly. So,
And that's hard, right? I mean, you're 21 through 26, you're still healing parts of yourself
yeah.
too throughout this time. So again, there's just so much strength that comes with even making that choice of finding resources, because I'm sure you're not like, you're aware to some people just choose to turn a blind eye to a
Hmm.
diagnosis like that, and
Yeah.
and just let them try to be as normal as possible and not get the help that they deserve. And so you making that decision at that young as well is really impressive, because you're right. You did give your daughter the best chance that she had to be
Hmm.
successful. And obviously it shows with the success that she has now.
Yeah.
Is there anything that specifically sticks out though from challenges that you faced while trying to heal parts of yourself and navigating this new diagnosis of raising a child with unique needs?
I mean, I think definitely, well, one, I had to learn patience, really learn patience with her, which was something that was never modeled for me. Patience, obviously from my dad was not there. And then from my mom, she was stressed out all the time. So I didn't have that model of patience. It was do, 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 and get it done. And,
Hmm.
don't complain about it. And this is our life. Whereas with my daughter, there was no way around being patient. These things were not going to happen until the therapy took place and it was consistent. So patience was definitely number one. But I struggled often with anxiety and panic attacks when she was young. And
Hmm.
I think it was because everything was kind of crashing down, and I worried, every single night when I go to bed, I would start crying, thinking about what was her future going to look like? What was her life going to look like? Um, would I be able, was I even doing enough? Was I doing the right thing? Could I do the right thing?
Hmm.
And I was also, and I didn't mention this, but I was also a single mom at the time. So working a full time job, going to school full time, doing all these therapies for my daughter, and I was burned out. Um, there's moments that I struggle with in her childhood that I don't remember because I think a big part of me blocked some of the stress out that took place. And that is something I still struggle with today, because as I raise my son, who is 13 years younger than her, I'm very intentional with him to remember a lot of the things that go on, because when I think back, I do remember great moments with my daughter, but the first like couple years are very hazy. And I think they're there, but there's something that's blocking that memory for me, I think, due to just the trauma of everything that was going on at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. I mean, that our bodies and minds do incredible things when it's
Yeah.
trying to protect us just from memories and trauma and things. I mean, you have enough to go around too. So it's not just that, it's, everything kind of adding up to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You spoke about how you were working inside of special education already. Was that, that came before your daughter was even here?
Yeah.
What led you to that decision to pursue that career?
That came based purely on interest. That was before my daughter was born, and I always knew growing up that I wanted to work in some capacity with helping others. I thought my career was going to lead me towards law, but it ended up in education. And I think before I knew what I wanted to do, I was just kind of dabbling in different areas. And so I had taken a position as a one-to-one para with a child, with a student, an autistic student. And it was in a preschool. And I was just his one-to-one, and I would stay with him all day. And after doing that for a year, due to budget cuts, I got cut from that position because I was the last one in. And then I left it for a little while, had my daughter, and that's when I started to realize maybe I need to go back to this, because not only was she inspiring me at that point, but I just started to realize, I think, when she was diagnosed, how, I don't know if misinformed is the right word, or just people are not informed enough about autism. And when parents get this diagnosis with their child, they don't even know where to go. They don't know what resources. If it happens in school, they're giving them big, long documents that they have no idea what that even means. The whole process is very confusing. And there's misinformation spread all over the place. So I think that's where I realized too, that I think that was the route that I wanted to go. And that if I could learn as much as I could for myself and my daughter, then maybe I could take that information and I could help other people with that too.
Just there, you spoke about how your personal experiences led you to supporting these students. Is there any other way that these places and things in life that you've been through is of changing and altering the aspects of way that you do support students now?
I would definitely say that both what I went through as a child and my experience with my daughter definitely impacts the way that I approach students, I approach their families. So, not to backtrack, but when I think back of when I was a child, there were teachers, there were counselors that asked me if there were things going on at home. And I wore this mask at school, right? I left, I was afraid to say anything. When I look back now, I wish that someone would have recognized those signs, because I think that just maybe it would have gotten me and my mom some help. Back then, you don't know that though. You live in isolation because of abuse, fear. And so now I feel like I am very intentional with our students that come in with high behavioral needs or very significant trauma in their background. I just try to be really sensitive and think about me as a kid and how people would approach me, and that I didn't trust them. And I try to think about the ways in which I can build that relationship with the student to make them inspired to kind of talk and you be that safe person, just not to uncover more trauma. Not every child has something going on in that moment, but just to be a safe person, because a lot of kids don't have that. They don't.
Yeah. Is there any specific moment that you can think of in your career where you've automatically just recognized that you were making a difference for a child or family?
There's plenty. I feel proud of the work that I do almost every day. I think that I really try my hardest to put my perspective of the parent. There was a mentor that I had early on in my career at a nonprofit organization. She was the director, and she told me, when you approach any situation or any meeting or anything that involves a student with autism, disabilities, trauma, anything, to put yourself in the perspective of that parent. Think about the nights that they stay up every night crying. And I think due to my relation of that, it helps me really to put myself in their perspective. So to answer your question, I think one of the most impactful moments that I can remember is I had a student with autism. The parents did not know much about autism, and I think that they were just very, very confused. The student was nonverbal. He hadn't said anything. He was 7 years old, but he had significant behavioral issues. I don't want to say issues, behavioral challenges. And I knew that it was coming from communication in some way. There was something that was upsetting him. He needed something, he wanted something, and he was unable to communicate that. And a lot of people were writing it off that, he didn't have anything to say, or he was just, being defiant, or. So the moment that I had advocated in a meeting for him to have an AAC device, which is an augmentative communication device. So to be able to click the pictures or create sentences or spelling, I had advocated for him to have that. And when we finally got it from the district and he finally made a whole sentence out to his mom and talked to her, like, I love you and I want to do this today, the tears that just kind of bawled out, because for the first time in years, he had something to say. Even though he always had something to say. And then the year that followed, that behavior decreased significantly in the classroom because he was utilizing his device and he was able to talk to people. And then a year later, I was a specialist for the district, and I would go visit the schools. And I walked into his classroom, and him and another student were with their device talking back and forth to each other from across the room. And it was just the most beautiful thing I think I've ever experienced, is just to see that so normalized within the classroom. And, he's saying one thing and then he's hitting the ha 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 button and they're laughing. And it was just like a normal conversation.
Yeah. How gratifying that was.
Yeah.
There's so many more resources out there that people are just unaware of too, and the importance of those resources can make a huge difference in someone's life. What do you feel like you wish that schools or educators need to do better when it comes to supporting those that might have a neurodivergent kid, or even those living with trauma?
I think that schools, in general, need to do better when it comes to supporting neurodivergent kids and also kids with trauma, because often they're focused too much on compliance and checking those boxes off rather than seeing what that child truly needs. I think more training for people in the industry. I don't know that, I can't speak for every district in the country, but I do think that we could do a way better job with the training, not only for special educators, but for teachers who don't teach special education, for teachers who teach general education classes, where there are kids with needs in their classroom and they need to be taught a different way. A lot of the time I come across teachers in general education settings, they just don't have any knowledge of it. They don't. And they'll come to me and they'll say, what do I do in this situation? And I feel like it should be any kind of practice in any classroom. There should be multiple ways of delivery of instruction to meet the needs of auditory learners, visual learners, but just a lot of the general education teachers are lacking in that training. And it's important and they want it, but districts are not providing that because that's not their specialty.
It's unfortunate because a lot of the scenarios and situations derive from someone not experiencing it themselves. So the people that are in charge of providing approval for resources never had to live through the experience. So it's hard for them to understand why it's needed, right? I give resources to this situation when it's not, nothing will come of it, which is an awful way to think. And it's we see that throughout so many different scenarios. You're sitting firsthand of what resources can do for a child and even for parents, right? And or whoever it is that is taking care of someone that needs a little bit extra support and the difference that it can make.
Absolutely. I think on top of that training and stuff, when you do find someone that is a strong advocate, and whether they are in special education or not, it usually is a person that has some kind of a personal tie to a child with unique needs or an adult with unique needs. So I think that is definitely true. A lot of the times that you need that personal perspective in order to see why it's so important. But with training and with perspective and sharing that, I think that it would reach a lot more people.
Absolutely. With all of this effort and with all of this that you give to other people, how do you continue to work on your own healing while you're supporting others?
That's a hard question. I think that it's a lifelong journey. I think I have my ups and my downs. I've been trying to be really intentional with giving myself grace and allowing myself to rest and setting boundaries in the circumstance with my dad. I know when there are issues that come up with him or he disappears and I start having anxiety, it's time to cut communication because I don't know what's going on and I can't take on that burden. I also just like to think it takes time to practice self-reflection and think about what I could be doing better to heal myself or take time to write, journal, and just reflect on my own thoughts that I have throughout the day. Because like I said, sometimes there's just really bad days. There's still days where things affect me nowadays from when I was a child. So I think that's pretty much.
It's never ending, right? And, what do you think it has been one of the hardest parts of a generational cycle? And on the other hand, what do you feel as it has been the most rewarding?
The hardest part, I think, of breaking a cycle is the weight of it, the weight of being the one to change it. That's definitely the hardest part because you don't think about that. The fact that everything you do has to be intentional. You have to think before you act in every way. And I'm not perfect by any means. I make a lot of mistakes, but it's a lot of weight to carry because then when you do make those mistakes, you feel like you should have known better. And why didn't I do it this way? I shouldn't have done that. That is definitely the weight.
Seems like it's a lot of forgiveness for yourself too.
Grace piece that I said. I'm not always the best at giving myself grace, but I'm trying.
All you can ask for, right?
Yeah. And then definitely the most rewarding, I think, is just knowing that my daughter and my son will never carry the same pain that I did. I may unintentionally bring things in from my childhood, but I'm very conscious of what it is that I'm trying to completely impact. So I think just that they won't have to carry that pain.
And if there was a message that you could send a parent that might be raising a child while healing from their own trauma, what would that be?
You don't have to be perfect. Perfect is not real. I think just being aware, being intentional, knowing that as long as you give your kids the love that they need, then you'll be okay.
I'm curious if you're comfortable talking about it. What does life look like now for your daughter?
So she's in high school now. She's in her first year of high school. And my daughter is in what they call a self-contained classroom. So she is unable to do a lot of the typical things that children her age would do. But she's independent in her own sense that she can communicate functionally. She can express her wants and needs. She has great interests. She's an amazing big sister. Her life going forward, I don't know I don't ever want to doubt her ability to be independent and carry on. Do I think that she'll probably need me and fall on me for support? Probably. But I'm trying to do everything that I can to set up her future. Mm-hmm. She's a beautiful girl who has she's extremely creative, a very good artist, but very different from the child that I was describing as a one and a half year old. I did not, if you would have asked me then what I envisioned her life to be like, I didn't see it what it is now. She's impacted, but she's not severely impacted by autism. She's still able to do her everyday tasks and stuff like that. but she
Yeah.
will probably rely on me, I think, for the majority of her life.
Yeah, and navigating, you had your daughter young. Obviously, you weren't with her father, and I'm not sure if he's actively in her life at all, but navigating dating and things after, it can't be
Mhm.
easy, right? And for you, must be hard in general, just with the trauma that you hold and trying to form healthy relationships. And it takes the right kind of person to be able to navigate that with.
Absolutely. My now husband, I got married a year ago. Even with him, I didn't meet him until my daughter was 10 years old. It took a very long time. I was very committed to I wasn't going to bring anybody in and out of her life because for a typical child, that is hard enough.
Absolutely.
For an autistic child, that's even harder to try to figure out who these people are and then they leave. And I didn't want to intentionally create trauma for her. So I think for me, it was a lonely time dealing with that, I think, for a long time because I wasn't really out there. And it did take me a very long time with my husband now to be able to trust him and get to a point where we had a relationship and then things were great. And then you get married and then things come up. And it's especially with a trauma background. So it's a constant working progress. It was hard for pretty much a decade. I avoided it because I had enough stress on my plate.
Yeah.
And I just was really focused on being there for her and then my career, my education. It just wasn't important at the time.
What kind of relationship, what's your husband's name?
Tyler,
Tyler and Haley have what kind of relationship that do they have?
they're extremely close. They are two peas in a pod. He gets her and she's comfortable with him. And I think that that's one of the things that made me fall in love with him when they first met and our relationship started growing. Was that I did not have to worry about him feeling awkward with her or her feeling awkward with him and I can still remember early on her having some slight meltdowns in situations where she was overstimulated by a loud noise or a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And he reacted just totally cool. And that is so rare sometimes to find. People freak out and they don't know what to do. And the comfortability was there from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like I said, the relationship just grew and now they complement each other. They're both goofy, awkward humor. He just plays along with it and makes her feel like she's the funniest person in the world. And it's a beautiful thing to watch.
And what does that relationship with Haley and her brother look like with Jameson?
It's beautiful. They have such a bond, the two
He's
of them.
3?
He is going to be two.
2.
In
Okay.
2 months. They have a beautiful bond. And it's interesting because I was nervous that her connection with him wouldn't be. I didn't know. She'd never been around another baby or anything
Mm-hmm.
before. And she'd been an only child for almost 13 years at that time. But from the minute he was born, she was just, I want to hold him. I want to change him. I want to feed him. And she'll sit in there and she'll read books to him. And it's really beautiful. It really is.
With Jameson having an older sister with the unique needs, that Haley will have, that'll just bring a lot more empathy into his world too, and recognition and education. He'll be just so much more prepared for life, and just by the reality of his own.
Absolutely. I think definitely his experience will help shape his perspective on the world too, which is all that I can ask for.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that he becomes his sister's protector because there might be a time where I'm not there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully he'll be that for her.
Becoming his sister's protector means, when I think of it, like when you just said that, it's beyond being the protection behind her, right? Like it's the protection by anyone, but about anyone that
the advocate
is her, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like and that protection of people who need it. So I can understand that, that
Absolutely.
statement. It's bigger than it itself, right?
Yeah, it absolutely is.
As we, come close to, closing out, I do have just a few more questions left of, how do you keep hope alive, right? In the hardest days, how do you continue to try to stay positive?
I think reminding myself why I started. I look at my daughter and I look at the families and the students that I've helped, which has been countless along the last 10 years or so. And I have to just continue to trust that I'm making a difference. Sometimes the world and things you see and things you read and hear about can make you feel very small, and like your impact isn't doing enough. But it is. And it's little drops that ripple, whether that's making an impact on that child's life and then they grow up and they become a teacher and then they make another impact. And I think it's just trying to remember on those hard days why.
And how can listeners connect with you if they want to continue along to watch your journey or the work that you're doing, or if they have any questions about resources, whether it's connecting with you on socials or if you're comfortable just sharing your email?
So my social media is the same as my email. It's Teaching and Raising Autism. So that's on Instagram and TikTok. And then I also have the email, Teaching and Raising Autism. I'm trying to put out there just more resources and education on the subject for both families and for educators.
What do you hope that people take away from hearing your story?
I hope that people take away that healing and advocacy go hand in hand, right? We can break cycles, we can create change, and we can show up differently, whether that's in our communities, our careers. I think as long as we take that pain and we turn it into something that helps other people, because we can sit and we can wallow in it, or we can turn that around and we can do something with it. I think that's just, I hope that people take that away, that they're not alone and that there's other people that you can help through your pain.
That was beautiful. My final question for you is, if you could say anything to your younger self, what would it be?
Well, this might make me. You're going to be okay. It's not your fault. You're loved, and it's going to be okay. You're going to do something with it all.
Well, Jessica, thank you so much for sharing your heart and your story with us today. Your strength in breaking generational cycles, showing up for your daughter, advocating for so many others is truly inspiring. To anyone listening, if you're navigating trauma, parenthood, or just trying to rewrite your own story, know that you are not alone and that healing is possible. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on For the Haters. Thanks for listening to For the Haters. Don't forget to connect with us on socials, follow, like, and share to help more people find this community, and remember, they're not alone. And if you haven't yet, join our Facebook group. We'd love to have you there. The more we grow, the more lives we can impact.
It don't matter what your name is, share your story, we'll be waiting.